known as the Reformation. Okay? Now, before I do this, though, and I promise I'll turn it back on, all right? We have to look at the brief and early history of Christianity, okay? Christianity is formed, it starts, okay? And remember, or those of you that took History 101 with me, if you didn't, then hopefully you went over this in your class, all right? Around the year 325, okay, the Emperor Constantine has a vision, and, he makes Christianity legal in the Roman Empire. A few years after that, the Emperor Theodosius makes Christianity the official religion of Rome. Okay, and so from that point on, Christianity is the main religion. Please, once again, remember, when we say Christian or Christianity in this context, what church are we talking about? Catholic. Okay, so back then, it was the only game in town. Okay, fast forward 1,000 years to 1059. Okay, we get to the Great Schism. All right, where the Catholic Church or the Christian Church separates into two. Okay, the Eastern Orthodox Church, which is predominantly, like the name says, Eastern Europe. Okay, so even today, it is the prominent, I put Easter, sorry. So today, it's the prominent religion of like Russia, Ukraine, that part of the world. During this time, it's centered in Constantinople, all right? But then in 1453, when Constantinople falls, it gets moved into Russia. So that is the dominant religion there. Meanwhile, in Western Europe, okay, it is the Catholic Church centered in Rome, all right? And so now we're going to jump 500 years to 519 to an event known as the Reformation. And this is where we get the further division between the Catholic Church and I put here others, okay? Today we refer to these as I'm sorry, I cannot spell in English today. The Protestant churches, the different Protestant groups that are out there. Okay, so what brought about this change? What brought about this separation of Christianity in Western Europe? Okay, well, the Catholic Church has been around, all right, for about 1,400 years. Okay. It was the one institution that kept medieval Europe together, all right? Because there was no central government, no control, but the church was always there, okay? But just like any organization, especially one that's over 1,000 years old, it was no longer the same thing that it was when it started, okay? And so people felt that the church had become corrupt. They felt that it had lost the true meaning of what, Jesus had taught. Now, to those criticisms, they were fairly accurate, okay? Now, just so you're aware, the Catholic Church didn't outlaw marriage for priests. Those of you that aren't Catholic priests can't get married. They're not even supposed to have sex or anything. Okay, but that didn't happen until the 800s. Okay, well, it's the 1500s, and a lot of Catholic priests and even the Pope had secret mistresses and had side pieces and all of that. All right, and so people knew it. Okay, and so obviously that is going against, by this point in time, almost 600-700 years of Catholic tradition. Okay, many times. People would become priests because they had no other options, they had no other choices, and their family was wealthy enough and influential enough that they could literally just give money to the church and the church would make them a priest, okay? So if that's how you became a priest, you're not going to want to follow the no sex rule. You're not going to really care about people. You just want to kind of like, all right, I got money, I got a place to live. All I got to do is give speech once a week. I'm good. All right. And then finally, during this time, the church, and this was like widespread, the Pope encouraged it, okay, was something known as indulgences. What is an indulgence? An indulgence is basically a get out of hell free card. All right? You could literally buy an indulgence from a priest, a bishop, the Pope, all right? And depending on the cost, it would give you 50 free sins, all right? And then, of course, if you bought enough indulgences, you could literally sin your whole life away, but you've got the indulgence signed by the Pope, all right? And you basically got into heaven when your life was over, all right? Because you bought your way there, okay? And so people were like, that literally does not sound like anything that Christianity should be, okay? And so the reason why it's known as the Protestant movement, or why churches that aren't Catholic are called Protestant churches, it comes from the word to protest, okay? Because they were protesting against the corruption in the Catholic Church, all right? How does it start? Well, a man named Martin Luther, okay, he is a Catholic monk, and he has spent his entire life studying the Bible and doing all of these good works and all of this stuff. And at some point, he feels the need to go visit Rome, because as a good Catholic, he should see the headquarters of the Catholic Church, all right? Muslims do something similar. They go to Mecca, all right, and make the pilgrimage, sorry. And so Martin Luther says, hey, I've been a good monk. I've monked my whole life. I want to go see Rome. And when he gets there, he sees riches. He sees corruption. He sees parties, and even amongst the Pope and his staff and the people that are supposed to be at the highest levels, he sees all of these things that he doesn't feel are right. He's been a good monk his whole life, isolated and dedicating his entire life to study and prayer and helping people, but he sees that the Pope doesn't do that, the cardinals don't do that, and so he begins to be very critical, okay? And he comes up with these ideas that are completely different from what the church has. And so, once again, I'm not here to get into a lesson on Catholicism or whatever, but there are certain things that you have to do in order to be saved, okay? These are known as sacraments. Okay, there are certain sacraments that you have to perform in the Catholic Church in order to be saved. Well, Martin Luther says that's bullshit. No, you just have to have faith. You just have to be good with God, and you don't need all of the other stuff. Okay, and in this case, it was he's like, the church is just adding these sacraments so that you have to pay them to get married. You have to pay them to have these things done. So obviously it's just a money-making scam for the church. Okay? He's like, no. And of course, you're buying forgiveness, you're buying indulgences. No. Forgiveness comes from God. You go and pray to him and he'll forgive you. All right? You don't need to go to a priest to buy a certificate that says you've been forgiven. Okay? The other thing is, he said, you know what? People go to church and people are told what to do, and the priest, preaches to you and whatnot, okay? But they've got all this other crazy stuff that you have to do. And Martin Luther basically says, Christianity should be simple. If it's not in the Bible, then why are you doing it? Okay? What gives you the right to suddenly alter, all right, some of these things? Now, the example I'm going to give is a real simple one, okay? Ash Wednesday was last week, and so for the next, subtract 7 days, 33 days is a time called Lent, all right? And supposedly during Lent, on Fridays, you're not supposed to eat meat, you eat fish, okay? That actually started with a pope, all right? It is not in the Bible, okay, at all, all right? You're not going to go to hell because you eat a cheeseburger on Friday, all right? And you know, you didn't get your Filet-O-Fish from McDonald's. Now, just FYI, I love a good fish fry. I mean, I'll eat all the fish I want, but not because it's like a sin if you eat something else, okay? And so that was Martin Luther. He's saying, hey, it's not in the Bible, so who cares, okay? And then finally, and this was the biggest controversy here, he basically told the people, you know what, you don't actually really need to go through a priest, all right? Your relationship with God should be one-on-one, and that's it. It's nobody else's business, okay? Because basically, you know, in order to perform some of these sacraments, part of it includes confessing your sins to a priest, and the priest, you know, absolving you and allowing you to take communion. And he's like, no, why can't you just pray to God and say, I'm sorry, I won't do that again, and there you go, as opposed to, you know, 10 Hail Marys, 50 Our Fathers, you know, go do all this other shit, and then you can get the little cookie, and, you know, it's not a cookie, it's a wafer. I don't know what it is. They're pretty good with peanut butter, but yeah, okay? So these are all of the criticisms that Martin Luther has, okay? And so what he does then is he begins to publish and to write down some of these things. Now, this becomes the foundation of his movement, okay? Number one, you don't need to do all of the sacraments. You don't need to do all of those other things that the church tells you you have to do. All you need is faith. That's it. Have faith in God, have faith in Jesus, you know, accept them as your Savior. Boom. All right, that's it. All of the other stuff is just extra. All right, and you don't want the extra. You just want the core of it. Okay? Number two, if it's not in the Bible, pardon my German, it's bullshit. All right, you don't need to do it. Okay? If it's in the Bible, then yes, that's what God expects of you. Okay? Otherwise, you can just ignore it. Okay? Number three, every one of you can be and I put priest in quotes because it doesn't mean go out and start your own church, although some people do, all right, and that's okay if you feel the calling, all right, but everyone is entitled to have, you know, a relationship with God. You don't need to go to a priest and confess your sins and have a priest tell you that God forgives you. Why can't you just pray in your room and feel the forgiveness? Okay, so yeah, all right, you know, the Catholic Church isn't happy with him, all right? Now, his biggest, like speeches and his biggest message, all right, is this, okay? Number one, all right, the church is corrupt, all right? Why the hell does the church have so much money? All right, I thought we're supposed to be charitable. I thought we're supposed to be helping, like, the needy and the sick and all of that. So why is the church like, you know, gold and silver and you still have, you know, poor people and stuff? But his biggest thing is, number one, the fact that, you know, church officials need to be abstinent. That's been the rule since the 800s, and yet priests, bishops, the Pope, all have women. They all have people on the side. They're all making babies, you know, like all this stuff. I mean, you know, what's going on? And of course, his second big thing is that, no, you cannot buy your way into heaven, all right? You cannot just go and buy an indulgence, okay? Now, just FYI, most of the Sistine Chapel was financed through indulgences, all right? The money, you know, the Pope's like, we need a new chapel. We need a grand, glorious building. I got to pay these painters. Go out and sell these forgivenesses, and you know, with the money, we'll build, okay? So, I always love posting this joke on October 31st, because what's October 31st? Halloween, 1517. He takes 95 theses, basically 95 complaints and their solutions, goes to a cathedral and nails it to the door, okay? The meme is, quit saying trick or treat to me, I have 95 theses, not 95 Reese's. Anyways, it's funnier in person. Liz?
there a difference between a Protestant church and a Lutheran church?
No. Lutheran is Protestant, but not all Protestant is Lutheran. Okay? But that's a good question. All right? The people, I think I paid you to say that. Okay? Now, no, really, I promise I'll come back. And so people begin to follow Martin Luther, and the church that he starts is known as the Lutheran Church. Okay, so there's still Lutheran churches. I know there's like 2 in Utica. All right, those are the ones that were created by Martin Luther. All right, and so yes, it is a Protestant church, and then other churches break off from the Lutheran. All right, so that's what I mean. All Lutherans are Protestant, but not all Protestants are Lutheran. Okay, so Pope Leo, that was his name at the time. The X means 10. All right, so Pope Leo X. Okay, and of course the Austrian king Charles V, because if you recall, Austria and the Pope are like that. Okay, they've been like that for about 400 years. Okay, they demand that Luther is arrested, and so the people that believed, especially the nobles that believed Martin Luther, hid him. They kept him in their castles. They, helped him escape. They helped him go to other places. You have to remember that there is no Germany during this time. There's almost 100 different German kingdoms. And so some of those German kings believed Martin Luther, and so they kept him hidden. Others didn't. So it was basically gotta find, the safe house type of thing. Eventually, he is excommunicated from the Catholic Church, and so yes, he founds his own branch known as the Lutheran Church. Okay, now remember that one of Martin Luther's main tenets is that you all, number one, need to have a relationship with God on your own without a priest. Number two, if it doesn't come from the Bible, then you don't have to do it, okay? But, okay, up until this point in time, the Bible was strictly in Latin, okay? The average person didn't know how to read and write in their own language, much less in Latin. Typically, the only ones that knew Latin were who? Yeah, the church people, the priests, the popes, the bishops. Okay, so I could say, Angelina, the Bible says you got to give me $10 million. It's right there. And, Angelina doesn't know how to read, or if she does, she can read German, but not Latin. And so, boom. So what Martin Luther does is he has the Bible translated into German. Okay, so that now the Germans that can read and write in German, okay, can read the Bible for themselves without having a priest tell them what's in it, okay? If someone didn't know how to read, well, what better way to teach you than by starting you on the Bible, all right? And just FYI, up until the 1800s, that's how most people learned how to read, was they were given a Bible and okay, start reading, okay, in whatever language was your language. And so in this case, we see then this German translation of the Bible. Now, it's in your textbook, but I didn't write it up here. The reason why Martin Luther was able to be so successful is because of Johann Gutenberg, who had lived, several years before him. What did Gutenberg do? Yes, all right. He produced, a newer printing press. Okay, so not only was Martin Luther able to publish all of his speeches and all of his teachings, but the Bible was printed in German using a Gutenberg press. And now that the press has been improved, because remember, it had already been invented, the Chinese did it, but unfortunately it did not have the movable type so that you could, change the lettering, and so you could print different pages really fast. After Martin Luther translated the Bible, he had it published, and pretty soon there were hundreds upon hundreds of Bibles being published, monthly, and he was giving them out to people. So, hey, you don't have to trust sorry, you're going to be the corrupt priest, who can only read the Bible in Latin to you. Now, Angelina can read it in German and say, priest, you're a liar. All right? That is not what it says. Okay? And so, yeah. All right? Now, one of the things that Martin Luther taught people is that you don't even have to believe everything I say. Okay? What's the only authority, once again, that you should follow? Starts with a B, all right? The Bible, all right? And I may read the Bible and interpret it one way. Angelina will read the Bible and interpret it a different way. That's okay. That's what Martin Luther said. That's okay, all right? Because obviously the message is tailored to you. And so soon people begin to break away from the Lutheran Church and form their own churches, okay? Because they interpreted the Bible a different way. And Martin Luther was like, fine, you should form your own. Like, he wasn't like the Catholic Church. He was like, go ahead, you should do it, all right? Form your own church. And everyone who believes the way you do can go, okay? So we want to touch on one branch of Protestantism, and that's Calvinism, okay? This was started by a preacher named John Calvin. You just want to call him John, that's fine. All right, but John Calvin, all right, basically Calvinism started right in the area where France and French Switzerland meet, okay? Some of the basics of Calvinism, because Calvin hears Martin Luther and follows him for a little while, but he's basically like, okay, Marty, I love what you've done. I love the changes, and your belief system, but you're not doing enough. Okay? Calvinism, all right, basically wants to strip down Christianity to the basic components, even more so than Lutheranism. Okay? Get rid of all the fluff. All right, hard benches, simple sermons, direct and to the point. Okay, everything should be simple. All right. Now, one of the core beliefs of Calvinism, and this one's kind of a weird thing, okay, is the concept of predestination. Okay, people who will go back to heaven have already been chosen. You're the chosen. You're the elect. All right? Just by the fact that you were born Calvinist, you're going to heaven. Everybody else, it doesn't matter what you do. It doesn't matter how good you are. You're going to hell. All right? It's already been predetermined. Okay? There's nothing you can do. All right? That's just the way it is. Obviously, if you follow me, John Calvin, you're one of the chosen. And if you don't, well, go ahead, be Lutheran, be Catholic. You're going to hell anyways, all right? Because that's just the way it was determined, already beforehand, okay? And as I said, okay, Calvinism preached simplicity, basics, get rid of everything, all right? Today, oh my gosh, Amish. I couldn't remember the word. Amish and Mennonites, they're actually Calvinist. Okay? Simple. All right? Bare basics type of thing. Okay? The Pilgrims, Thanksgiving, turkey, all that shit, they were English Calvinists. Okay? That's why they were kind of, not liked in England. Because they, they were freaks. And so yeah, they came to America to be freaks on their own, type of thing. So yeah, okay. Now, there are other movements that happen. Unfortunately, we can't get completely into all of them, but just be aware that most of these, okay, movements took hold in areas. For example, the Netherlands. The Netherlands was being ruled by Spain at this time. And by this point in time, Ferdinand and Isabella's grandchildren and great-grandchildren had married into the Habsburg family. And remember, the Habsburgs are like this with the Pope. Okay, it all circles back, all right? They're all together. And so in the Netherlands, Protestantism, specifically Calvinism, all right, became very popular as a way to like distinguish themselves from Catholicism. Okay, so in this case, we see Calvinism and other forms of Protestantism take hold. Okay, and so this map, it's in your textbook. It basically shows, okay, where the major branches and where the divisions are. Okay, everything in this weird orangey color, that was where Catholicism remained, you know, the dominant religion. Everything that you see in yellow, that is where Protestantism, okay, was the major religion. And if you look closer, it actually breaks down because some areas were Lutheran, some areas were Calvinist. Lutheran, okay, Calvinist, okay. England is a little different. It becomes what's called Anglican, although you do see some Calvinism in Scotland and stuff like that, okay? So, you know, the areas now, oh, and of course, don't forget, Eastern Orthodox, okay? The Eastern Orthodox Church doesn't really split the way Catholicism does, okay? Probably because their priests were always allowed to marry and they had like other rules that they had come up with. But anyways, okay? So that's the divisions, okay? Now, obviously the Catholic Church isn't just going to let this happen, all right? And so those of you that know me, or if you want to get to know me, I'm a Star Wars nerd, so the Catholic Church strikes back, all right? What do they do in order to stop this, okay? We get what's called now the Counter-Reformation, all right? The Reformation is when Martin Luther and other Protestant groups split off. And so now the Counter-Reformation. How do we stop that? Okay? It starts at a meeting called the Council of Trent. You don't need to know all of the things or even the dates. I threw them up there if you were curious. But the important thing, okay, number one, they weren't going to try to change. They were going to push more of the Catholic Church's teachings, okay? But they did acknowledge that Martin Luther had a point about the corruption, okay? So they're not going to get, you know, because, okay, Martin Luther was like, you don't need sacraments to get into heaven. You just need faith, all right? Well, the church is like, no, that's not quite right. You still got to do, like, the baptism, the marriage, the confirmation, the this, the that, because, you know, we still get money from it. We still need money, okay? But this whole priest having sex, yeah, I guess we better stop that, all right? He has a point, especially since it's been a rule since the 800s, all right? We should probably start enforcing, okay? And yeah, at the Council of Trent, the Catholic Church decides, I guess we better stop selling get-out-of-hell-free passes, all right? That's probably not the best thing to do. All right, and they do a bunch of other things, but for now you just have to remember that they double down on their teachings. We're still going to keep the sacraments, all right? We're not going to listen to that criticism, but yeah, the sex thing, the selling things for money, okay, yeah, that one, those we're going to change. Martin Luther kind of got us there, okay? Now, in order to enforce this, in order to make sure that all Catholics are doing this, we see the foundation of a group known as the Society of Jesus. All right, today they are known as the Jesuits. Okay, a man named Ignatius Loyola, or a priest named Ignatius Loyola, he creates them, and basically their charge is to go out and show people that we're a better Catholic Church. We're going to stop selling indulgences and and having sex with people and having children and all of that. At least the priests are, and the bishops and the popes. All right. So we're going to do this. Okay. Now, of course, there's still people that are like, yeah, screw you, church. We don't believe you. Number one. Number two, we kind of like this new way of worshiping that Martin Luther has introduced us to. All right, where it's all on us. Okay, that's kind of a good thing. Or John Calvin, like, just keep it simple. Like, just, no, none of these, like golden things and big crosses, and no, just very basic bare bones. Okay, and so we see the return of more inquisitions. If you recall, the inquisitions started in Spain as a way to, number one, get rid of all Jews and Muslims. Okay, and then number two, to get rid of any fake converts. Okay, well, now the Inquisition is being used to get rid of anyone who questions the Catholic Church. Okay, and so we see other things. They start to burn books, they start to accuse everyone of witchcraft, they start to do like all of this other stuff. Okay, now this leads then to what's called the 30 Years' War, because it lasts 30 years. Okay? This was, I guess you could say, the first Christian versus Christian conflict, okay? Where it's basically I want to say the Catholic Church, but it's predominantly, most of the war takes place in what today is Germany, within the boundaries of the Holy Roman Empire. I promise I'll come back to this. I just need to show you the map. All right? It takes place all just like right here, inside these blue lines. Okay? That's it. Most of the war is there. Okay? And it's basically the kingdoms that support the Catholic Church against the kingdoms that are trying to break away from the Catholic Church. Okay? They're trying, they're Lutheran, they're Calvinist, they're whatever. Okay? And it's not just the knights and the armies that fight, but the common people also begin to rise up, because they're the ones that are predominantly affected by, all of this religious stuff. Okay? During these 30 years, the war is actually pretty terrible, all right, because it all takes place in one spot, and it was literally over religion, okay? My Jesus can beat up your Jesus, okay, is basically what it was, all right? In the Netherlands, okay, we see, because, they predominantly convert to Calvinism, we see that they rise up against Spain, who is Catholic. And this is kind of the beginning of the end for Spain. For several years, they've been, getting treasure and gold and silver and all of that stuff from the Americas. Wars cost money, okay? And so now they are using all of the gold and silver and treasure that they've acquired to put down these rebellions, number one, and to try to promote Catholicism in the countries that are slowly breaking away from the Catholic Church. Okay? And so, spoiler alert, Spain loses a lot of money, and they do lose, their part of the war. Okay? And so this begins the decline of Spain, and slowly the Dutch and the English become more and more powerful, all right? Because once the 1600s come around, they're the big players. It's no longer Spain and Portugal, okay? And it's because of this religious warfare, okay, that especially Spain kind of falls apart, okay? Now, France, we're not ignoring France, okay? They also have a civil war, okay, where, Protestants are fighting against Catholics, okay. It leads to what's called the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre in 1572, where Catholics just go out and murder everyone who is not Catholic. All right, that's the best, the quickest, the easiest way to get rid of these rebellions. Okay, now, French Protestants are known as Huguenots. All right, just as a FYI, I'm jumping ahead like 100 years. Most of the French who settled in Canada were the Protestants, were the Huguenots. Okay, because obviously they weren't welcome in France. All right, so if anyone here is French Canadian, or like your grandparents or whatever, then they are the descendants of those Protestant groups that had to leave France for Canada. Okay, now, eventually, a man named Henry becomes king of France. The problem is that he's Calvinist. Okay, and so by now, the Catholics have won. Okay. And they basically tell him, okay, Hank, if you want to actually be the king, I know you're like the oldest son and the throne is yours, but you need to be Catholic, all right? Otherwise, we're going to rise up in revolution against you, okay? So he converts to Catholicism, but he never really embraces it, because what he does as king is he passes laws that allows Protestants to exist, allows Protestants to, be a part of society, to avoid persecution, and things like that. All right. Eventually, like I said, in the later 1600s and 1700s, those French Protestants eventually all migrate to Canada, and because of, the rules that King Henry put into place, it makes it very easy, okay? France is a Catholic country up until the French Revolution, all right? At that point, they not only get rid of the king and shit, they also get rid of religion. They execute a couple priests and people have to run away, okay? Fast forward to today, France is atheist. They don't believe in any religion, okay? They're like, yeah, right, look at our history. We've had too much problems with it. So let's just avoid it altogether, okay? But pretty soon then, once this settles down, countries then become identified with either Catholicism or with Protestantism, and it doesn't matter which form of it is, okay? Countries begin to separate along those lines, especially in Germany, where the different kingdoms begin to separate along, whether you're a Catholic king or a Protestant king. And then once that begins to happen in those Protestant countries is where we begin to see, hey, if Martin Luther could translate the Bible into German, why can't we translate it from German to French, or from German to English, or from German to Dutch? Okay, that way we can follow those basic rules that he lined out, that we should only believe the Bible, and we can use this now to educate our population. All right, and so once again, to show you the map of how Europe then, within a span of about 40 years, okay, separates completely along religious lines. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about, and it's not 100% in your textbook, but that's why you pay for Santos. All right, you get everything. Okay. We've talked about the religions that rebelled against Catholicism, and we have Lutheran, we have Calvinist, okay, and stuff like that. But if you look at England, okay, you have something called Anglican. All right. Now, England becomes Protestant. It's in yellow. All right, but it doesn't do it because it thinks the Catholic Church is corrupt. It doesn't do it because they object to Catholic teachings or they object to priests having wives or anything like that, okay? They do it because of a king named Henry VIII. VIII. Sorry, forgot my Roman numerals for a second. Henry VIII was the king. He was married to a woman named Catherine. Catherine was from Aragon, which is right here in Spain. All right. Catherine had a daughter from her first marriage, but she was older, in her 30s. Sorry, all right, I know that's not old, but back then it was. And she wasn't having any more kids, number one. Henry wanted an heir. He wanted someone to inherit the English throne. Okay? Number two, Henry had all kinds of side ladies. All right? He was the king. He got to sleep around with whomever he wanted. But any kids that were born out of those marriages were considered bastards and could not inherit the British throne, okay, or the English throne. All right? They had to be legitimate children. So, Henry's problem, all right? I got all these other side pieces, all right? Any one of them, he actually had his eye on one specific one, good old Anne Boleyn. She was hot, all right? So he wanted to marry her. She was young and could probably produce him a son, all right? Catherine was old, you know, she had a daughter from her first marriage, probably not going to do it. So, solution is let's get divorced. Oh, wait, for those of you who aren't Catholic, or does the Catholic Church allow divorce? No, it's a big no-no, all right? But the Catholic Church does, there's a loophole to everything, all right? There is a thing called annulment. You can still do this today. An annulment basically says the marriage never happened. So technically you don't get divorced, you get annulled. All right? And today, like, there's a list of reasons why you would get an annulment. Well, back then, Henry's like, I'm the king. She hasn't produced a male child. All right? I need someone to inherit the throne. The only person that can grant an annulment is the Pope. All right? So Henry sends a letter to the Pope. The Pope, under normal circumstances, would do this, but his cousin. Is he going to let his cousin be put away and replaced by a younger, hotter babe who might give Henry a son? No. Some of you are going, no. And so the Pope says no. No, sorry. You're not getting rid of my cousin. So what does Henry do? He says, Pope, you suck. F you. I'm creating my own church. All right? The Church of England. It's basically the Catholic Church, except that the leader of the Church of England is the king, not the Pope. Everything else stays the same, okay? And as the leader of the Church of England, I divorce myself from her. And then he marries Anne Boleyn. And she does not produce a son. She produces another daughter. And then he has her executed because people say that she had an affair with her brother. Yeah, I know, it's gross. And so then he marries another woman. Same thing, doesn't produce him a son, so he divorces her. It's not till like his fourth wife that finally gets a son, but the son dies in infancy. So anyways, that leads to a whole other drama. But that's how the Church of England started, okay? And you can't just say, I'm Church of England, I'm Anglican. That's what they call it, you know, a Church of England person, okay? Guess who the head of the Church of England is today? If it was King Henry 500 years ago, King Charles. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand. Were you going to say Charles? Okay, yeah, and before like a year and a half ago, it was Queen Elizabeth. She was the head of the church, okay? Now, granted, they don't actually do anything. I want to say the Bishop of Westminster is the one that actually runs the church, but the head is the king or queen. Okay? So someday when Charles dies, which may be sooner than later, he has prostate cancer, William will be the head of the Church of England. Okay? Final fun fact. English people came to America and settled here, and a lot of them were members of the Church of England, but in America, especially after it became independent, you can't actually call it the Church of England. All right? Does anyone know what the Church of England is called in America? It took on a different name. Oh, I don't see your hand, because you've had all the answers. No? Episcopalian. The Episcopalian Church is the Church of England. If you find an Episcopalian church, you will see it has the symbol of England on there. Okay, I see it every day downtown Utica. There's one on the corner of, I want to say, Elizabeth and Genesee. It was built in the 1600s. It actually says it right there. Church of England in America. All right, I will shut up and let you go